Downtown District, hosted by Main Street Missouri Connection. My name is Stephen Flannery III. I am part of the Pacific Partnership. I have the privilege this year of being the president. We also, this evening, let me get this thing wrestled up a little higher here. This evening we have speaker here, Keith Wingy, who will be walking us through the program with Main Street Missouri. Just kind of, for some of you folks, to give you a little history. Back in August, end of August, beginning of September, a group of us took a trip up to Jeff City to a Main Street Missouri affiliate grant workshop to kind of find out a little bit about Main Street Missouri and their revitalization efforts. And from that point on, we applied for their affiliate grant to kind of help the community begin with its revitalization efforts. We were accepted to the grant program, and now we're moving forward, and this is our first public event in that grant process. Through that process, we went around and reached out to community partners to make it a success, and we found those partners not only in our citizens, but in the Chamber of Commerce, the City of Pacific, and the Pacific Tourism Commission. So real quickly, if I could have the Chamber of Commerce, those members that are here, please stand so you guys can see who those members are. Thank you. And if I can have the Pacific Partnership Board members, please stand. Now, if you'll notice, a couple of those members between the Chamber and the Partnership do bleed over. That's because we're involved in our community. Thank you very much. And I know there's a few aldermen here, so if our aldermen will stand, these are our city partners, as well as our city administrator. I saw him hiding somewhere. He's enjoying the good food, being modest. So thank you. Unfortunately, I don't see any of our Tourism Commission here. Unfortunately, the president of the Tourism Commission was not feeling well, and we gave his regrets and unable to be here this evening, but I do know that he dearly wanted to. So I thank all those members. These are the folks that are going to be working to make this possible, to see the bigger vision of our downtown district and our community as a whole and move forward. I'd be remiss as president if I didn't give a little plug. The Pacific Partnership, for those who may not be aware, was formed in 2002 as a revitalization organization with the mission to promote the city of Pacific and to preserve the cultural heritage of our old town. Now, the mission is much longer than that. There's the thumbnail sketch. We've worked toward that, as you have seen in our events, through the car show, Heritage Days, or formerly Railroad Days, our concerts we've had on the plaza, barbecue contest, and a few other things throughout the year. We've also been a strong community partner with the city, with our events, as well as helping the city manage the rodeo. And so we've always had good support there and a good relationship. So now it's time to kind of take it a step further and become more mature in our revitalization efforts, and that's what Main Street Missouri is here to do with your help and your input as citizens for the next year, 2 years, 10 years, 100 years. So this is not a 2-year process, it's a forever process to make our community better. Before I turn the microphone over to Keith, I do want to introduce a couple people, or at least recognize them. We have this evening one of our state reps, Kirk Matthews, who is raced back home from Jeff City to be part of our evening. And I did see Representative Nate Tate sneak in. Nate, get shirt tucked in, buddy? It is. There you go, good deal. A little inside joke, but I'll fill you guys in on the break. So I appreciate you two gentlemen being here this evening, and hopefully when time comes for support on the state level, you'll have an idea of what we're doing. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Keith Wingy of Main Street Missouri Connection, and he's going to be our Sherpa for the evening to guide us through the process. Thank you, Keith.
Do I need to use a microphone?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. I feel like I should be like Elvis with this microphone. I'm not as tall as Stephen. And I may move away from the microphone from time to time, so just remind me because I move around and I talk with my hands. If I can hold that, does it come on? All right, we'll try to do this. I'm excited to be here tonight. As Missouri Main Street, I'm the Community Development Coordinator, and I travel all over the state, helping communities with their downtown revitalization efforts. And I've held meetings in churches and school cafeterias and school gymnasiums, but this is my first opera house, so I'm very excited. This is an awesome building, so kudos to you for hosting this event in this room tonight. It's awesome to be here. So Stephen covered a little bit about the grant process. We offer this affiliate grant. It's a grant for services. So it's a grant where we work with the community for 2 years, helping them with their revitalization efforts for their downtown. And I'm going to talk about a lot of that as we go, so it'll start making more sense. And talking about what is Main Street, because it's more than just downtown revitalization. So we'll cover that. And then we're going to do a little brainstorming tonight and break up into some groups. And we want to hear from you about what you think is important with relation to your downtown here in the Pacific, or if I get it right, Old Town, right? So those are kind of the agenda items for tonight. But before we get started, I want to know, see the microphone's already messing me up. Do you guys believe in ghosts?
Yes.
Building is haunted.
Yes, I always have technical problems, and I blame it on the ghost. All right, there we go. So that's what I described we're going to do tonight. That's our agenda. But before we get started, what I want to do is learn a little bit about you. So we're going to do this quickly because you guys have a great crowd here tonight. So I just want to know your name, your connection to downtown, and why you're here tonight. Okay? But we have to keep it brief, or we could be here for hours. I'm sure you want to be home before 10 o'clock, right? Because my presentation is going to go until 10. No, I'm kidding. We won't be here until 10. Let's start right here.
My name's Maria Brennan. My connection to downtown is my husband and I bought the old antique mall. We're opening a coffee shop. Plug. And then, of course, I want to know what is each role and understand how this is going to work for us.
My name is Monica Mauer, and my connection is we've got a business or two in town, and I belong to the partnership. I'm on the board, and I came tonight and I'm on this project. So,
My name is John Ornanka. I've been in Pacific for 15 years. I just want to continue seeing the Pacific move forward, see what this is all about.
I'm his wife, Denise Warnanka, and I'm here just for this.
My name is Liz French. I went to high school out here in the city, came back because I started a family of my own. I have an investment into this town. I own a home, and increasing the prosperity of downtown impacts all of us.
And
So this is my Emily.
Emily's already said she's ready to share her thoughts on downtown for tonight, so I think that's awesome.
I'm Gary Kelly. I've lived here since 1954. I was born in 1954. So lived here almost all my life. I taught school here for 30 years. I've really never left Pacific, and I've been on the planning and zoning board for about the last 12 years.
Kate Reisenhofer, and I'm here because I'm interested in the Riverwalk Trail that we would like to get started here, so I want to see how that can be connected with the downtown.
I'm Debbie Kelly. I'm his wife. Here to see what's going on. Jill Fennell. I live in the north backs up to Lamar Creek. Just interested in seeing what other businesses we can bring to downtown. like to get out and do things close by.
I'm Dale Huffman, and I came down to see if we could get Pacific back to where it used to be a long time ago.
Kayla Clare, I'm a realtor in town. I live in town. I'm excited about new growth in Pacific.
I'm Robert McCaskill. I volunteer at the not-for-profit 501c3 Trade Museum, and I'm here to represent our not-for-profit group and to help make downtown bring in more tourists.
My name is John. I also live in the Tower of Pacific, the other end down here. I also do work at the Trade Museum. I'm also a volunteer at the Senior Center. And I got to see this town take off and grow. We need more businesses down here.
Right.
Grow.
Thank you for coming.
My name is Pam Donahue. I run an embroidery business. I've been here for 10 years, and I'm trying to look for a place that's right down here to get more exposure. And I did the shirt. Thank you.
My name is Tracy Mercado. My parents, and I are owners of Birds Homes right there on the corner, in the process of rehabbing it. But it's a very long process. This is Madeline.
Great, awesome, thank you.
I'm Nancy Omer. Look out the window, building across the tracks where we have operated an income tax business for about 35 years. Want to see the downtown area boom.
Great.
I'm Jim Holbrook, pastor of St. Bridget, Kildare Parish. Very interested in seeing the town grow.
Ann Hennigan, the principal at St. Bridget's here in Pacific, and again, interested in making connections in the downtown community.
Erica Ham, I grew up in Pacific. My father owns the Alt Farms out on the edge of town, and I am currently a teacher at St. Bridget's.
I'm Rob Schmidt, connection to downtown. We run the Pacific Care Center, the nursing home in Pacific, and I just want to see some type of change.
I'm Floyd Harris, I'm the Vice President of Partnership, been an alderman in the past, and it's always great to see, what changes we can do to revitalize the downtown district.
Sarah Brennick, I grew up in Pacific and I work in Pacific, and I'm with the partnership.
Kim Barkerville, I'm also a resident and work in the city chamber.
I'm Diana, my husband and I grew up in Kirkwood, so I'm used to walking everywhere, and we bought a house in the city of Pacific, and I'd like to have places to walk. Yeah.
Casey Walker. I grew up here. I live on the outskirts of Westland, but I'd like to see on the road.
Back to farm. I'm Sam Savannah, 35 West St. Louis area.
Eric Harley. I grew up out here.
Okay.
I'm Tracy. Hi, everyone. Live in Pacific, work in Pacific. Very, very interested in seeing the reputation of Pacific changing.
Hi, I'm Jerry Holloway, owner of Brown Jerry's Blues Blues and Barbecue. And the reason why I'm here is because I was praying.
That's true.
I was going to say I'm not Jerry, but Jerry said it.
That's a term called voluntold. You're not a volunteer, you're a voluntold.
I'm Steve LaFrance, I owner down in Blue House. Been here almost 4.5 years. Town's grown since I've been here. It's all good. The town sticks together and sticks together.
Steve Flannery, this is where the car broke down.
Is that Steve Flannery too?
That's two.
Don Shell, my wife Angela, and I own the Rutledge Bakeries in Old Town. Oversee Pacific Road.
Great.
Mark Lathos, I'm just a resident, and I've come to Boone to see what kind of things they have
I'm Samantha Stobler. I've been here about 2 years, and my family has a business that we're considering bringing here to Pacific.
I'm Drew Stopper, ran one of the Edward Jones office for about 4 years, board member of the partnership and chamber, so voluntold.
And I brought the Edward Jones pen, it's not.
I was gonna say,
Edward Jones is a big sponsor of ours for many years. It's been great, we appreciate it.
I'm Greg Ulmer, Ulmer Tax in the county. I just want to see what I can do to help.
Great.
Tina Bell, I've lived here my whole life, and I'm also the manager at the Search Boots down here in downtown branches of the city.
Great. What do you next?
I'm Heather Philly. I'm a resident of Pacific. I'm a current alderman. And my husband and I actually have a business as well. So we're members of the chamber, we're members of the partnership, and we just like to see what Pacific can do in the future.
I'm Amanda Nemeth, and I'm just interested to see what can come.
I'm Andrew Nemeth, I've been here a year and a half.
Pacific,
About 2 years. Just wanted to be part of the movement, how we can make change now.
I'm Dan Ron, I'm on the board of the partnership, and everyone would like to see more things downtown.
Adam Kraus, I'm on the board of justice for the Chamber of Commerce, and founder director of the Pacific Partnership. I also have a business in the downtown, Hamburg Pizza for 23 years.
I'm Steve Rock, I'm the administrator for the city, and also I'm a downtown resident.
Great.
Jeff Philly, I was the hired driver for the Eagle.
Tom Savage, principal of Pacific High School. Want to make us available to whatever we can do to help the community.
Great, that's awesome, thank you.
Cody Kelly, lifelong Pacific resident, worked here, coached high school baseball here. Would like to see what we can do to add business to this town.
I'm Debbie Kelly, his mother, and also elected official for City of Pacific and a collector, longtime resident, grew up here, graduated here. Pretty much know everybody, so I don't want to need an introduction, but I look forward to seeing it grow.
I'm Carol Minton. I've lived here almost 40 years, and I just want to see it come back to see what we can build.
Okay, great. Move over here.
Nick Lebowski, Alderman, Ward 1. Downtown is in my ward. My office is pretty much right below me. I would like to see downtown become a better place, start moving businesses back in, see what we can do to infill.
Steve Myers, one of the aldermen for the city of Pacific and business owner. I want to make Pacific as good as it can be.
Lori Myers, and I live here on my life. And I'm here to see growth in the city and with the Riverwalk team.
Lisa Trolio, my husband and I moved here about a year and a half ago to get away from the crime and 1% rates tax downtown. And we couldn't be more thrilled with the city. We're just here to help and see if there's potential that we can support for them.
Judy Lipscomb, my husband and I moved here to Rockford about 19 years ago. We like coming into Pacific. We want to be able to come to Pacific and not go out to Eureka and Washington so much. So we're just here to see what some of the ideas are.
George Lipscomb, and we'd like to see the hub leveraging the heritage for the as a resource, an economic resource. But I also have a particular interest in seeing this become a health and wellness center that is useful for the community here, but also as a resource for the larger environment around us.
Great.
John Buster, Pacific resident. I'm also a member of the Pacific Riverwalk Trail Committee and advocate for good people and good things.
Great. Sure, we'll move right over here.
Right here?
Yes.
Bob Son, retired, live in the city.
Pauline Son, Pacific Edward, Missouri.
Nick Tate, state rep, and I'm here because Steve is threatening me. No, not really. I just came to see how I can help out.
Great.
Carol Johnson, Board of Aldermen. I've served 16 years. Came here in 71 when downtown was a bustling,
sorry.
Mike Big, Alderman Ward 3, also on the tourism committee. Just want to see what we can do to help.
Okay, awesome. We'll go right here.
Rick Presley, Presley Splash Company. I'm a long-time Pacific resident, Chamber of Commerce member, Vice President of the Chamber of Commerce, business owner, love Pacific, want to see it grow.
I'm Kirk Matthews. I'm a business owner. I'm state representative. I represent the downtown area. I have that privilege, and I'm here to learn about the Main Street program and see what we can do to help.
Don Hazelwood. I've lived here for about 45 years. Moved in here from New York. Been actively involved in the Boy Scouts ever since. Involved with the Knights of Columbus, and I'm treasurer with the Pacific Partnership.
Great.
Tiffany Wilson, Executive Director for Pacific Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm also on the board for the Pacific Partnership.
I'm Patty Myers. My husband Greg and I, we own the building that the Edward Jones office is in. It is his office. So I'm very interested. That is downtown on St. Louis Street. I'm interested in what else we can bring down there.
I'm Greg Myers, lifetime resident of Pacific. I have I'm one of the 3 Edward Jones offices in town, and I'm the president of the Chamber of Commerce currently. I love Pacific. The downtown is the heart, and I want to see that a vibrant part of the town. But honestly, I'm looking to learn things in helping to revitalize the downtown that we can use for the whole community.
And last but not least, who is this?
I'm Deirdre Long. I'm the publisher of the Current News, and I'm here to record tonight's proceedings and to see what we can do to help you guys grow.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. This is a great turnout. The partnership group was very concerned, as is every group when we do things like this, how many people are going to show up? How many people are going to show up? And you guys came out, which is awesome, and we appreciate that. And from the introductions that you did, I can definitely tell that there's a lot of community pride in this room. And so that's great, particularly for what we're going to do in just a little bit. So who am I? I'm Keith Wingy, and I am the Community Development Coordinator for Missouri Main Street. Missouri Main Street is a non-for-profit, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a few seconds. But how did I get to this point? I actually have 25 years of hospitality and hotel experience behind me. And through that process of being in the hotel business, I've moved around all over the country. And I've lived in Las Vegas, I've lived in Omaha, Nebraska, Marietta, Ohio, Atlanta, Washington, D.C. But always my favorite places were small, historic towns. And I've worked for a couple of historic hotels. And how I got involved in Main Street was in Excelsior Springs, Missouri. How many of you have been to Excelsior Springs or to the Elms Hotel? Okay, great. Well, that's where I was. I was hired as the general manager of the Elms Hotel in Excelsior Springs. The hotel dates back to 1888, so a very rich history. The healing qualities of the mineral water in Excelsior Springs is what brought people there. So I was hired as the executive director in 2006, and a couple months after I started that job, some business owners came to me and said, hey, we want to start this group to help with our downtown. The city had done a streetscape project, and now it was time for a volunteer group to take over the efforts and to help with event planning and economic development for downtown. And at the time, I thought it was a merchants group. That's what it was going to be. But I soon learned about Main Street, and we formed our organization. I served on the board of directors for about 4 years, and we reached our capacity as an all-volunteer organization. And it was time to hire our first executive director, and I really thought this Main Street was pretty cool. And so I applied to be our director, and I was hired. So learning about Main Street, learning how it functions, learning how it helped our community. How many of you have been to Excelsior Springs in the last year or two? Okay, there's one hand back there. Can you tell that there's a difference that's happened there? Yeah. Our downtown was, let's see, when we started in 2006, our vacancy rate was about 40%, and now it's down in the upper teens. So there's been a big transformation. And I'll talk a little bit in the presentation about how to measure those things, but we measure sales tax for our downtown district. And the revenue of sales to generate that sales tax for downtown went from $3 million in 2006 to $9 million in 2012, 2013. So we made a big difference, and it was Main Street and that Main Street structure that helped us. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And congratulations to Pacific for being awarded this grant. We only award up to 5 grants per year. So Pacific was one of those communities that we awarded last year. So we're excited to work with you for the next 2 years. And I just love coming to communities when there is this much enthusiasm for their downtown. And it doesn't happen in every community. There are times where we do these town hall meetings and there aren't very many people there. So that's great. Kudos to you. So, what is Main Street? So Main Street is an organization. Our organization is part of that. But there's also the National Trust, or the National Main Street Center, which actually started out of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So there's a national organization that is the organization that started this structure. And I'm going to talk about that history in just a second and how that came out of the National Trust. But Main Street is also a methodology. It is a philosophy. It's principles dealing with revitalization in older traditional business districts. So basically, it's economic development with an emphasis on historic preservation. And that historic preservation element comes from the National Trust Association, but also that's what makes each of our communities different, is that history and that culture. So that's why that is important. Main Street is also a network. So you've got a national network. There are over 2,000 communities that are using Main Street in their revitalization efforts of their downtown across the country. In Missouri, we work with about 140 communities in Missouri. Not all of them at the same level, though. But just in Missouri, there are 140 communities that are either practicing Main Street or very interested in Main Street. But it's that network. And there's also coordinating programs, which is what Missouri Main Street would be called. We are the coordinating program for Main Street in Missouri. So we have a contract with the National Main Street Center to provide the tools and resources to our Missouri community in relation to Main Street. It's also a brand. When we heard about Wall Street versus Main Street during the economic crisis, that Main Street portion was referring to our communities, our downtowns, Main Street America. And so the National Main Street Center is the organization that understands and is out there advocating and teaching and training on downtown revitalization. So they own that brand. But also it's that advocacy. It's that advocacy, it's that return to community empowerment. National Main Street, Missouri Main Street, we don't come into a community and tell you, here's what you need to do. It's we help you as a community do the work within their community. There's no one else that's going to revitalize your downtown for you other than the people within your community. And so it is that empowerment of that community. Main Street is a volunteer-driven organization. It's a community-driven organization. So while Main Street is focused on downtown, it's really a community organization. And I applaud those folks that came that really don't have an association to downtown, but downtown is important to them. So I mentioned the National Main Street Center. In 1977, a pilot program was started by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And that came out of the department stores leaving the downtown city centers and moving to the suburbs, moving to the shopping malls. So as that was happening, property owners were wondering, how are we going to take care of our buildings if we don't have tenants anymore? How are we going to take care of these historic buildings if we don't have an income stream? So the National Trust said, let us study this. Let us look at downtowns. Let's look at the dynamics of downtowns. Look at those that are failing. Look at those that are successes. And that's where the Main Street model came from. It came from a 4-point approach, a comprehensive approach to downtown revitalization. And those 4 points deal with the social aspect, the physical aspect, the economic aspect, and the civic side. So, and we're going to dive into those. You're going to see a theme coming up with a 4-point approach as we get through this presentation, but that's where it all came from. Those successful downtowns had that comprehensive approach. They weren't just focused on events, or they just weren't focused on their buildings, or they just weren't focused on the streetscape. They were focused on it all. So that's where it came from. Now there's over 40 states that are using Main Street, and like I said, over 2,000 communities doing that. So the National Main Street Center, after its 35-year anniversary, went out and studied, does the Main Street approach still work? Does this comprehensive approach still work? And found definitely it does. But learned some things about that approach. They learned that people currently want to live in authentic and dynamic communities or locations. And who's leading that are the boomers and the millennials. Those two generations represent the largest demographic within our country. And it's funny that they're on opposite spectrums, the boomers over here, the older generation, and the millennials over here, the younger generation, but the things they want are very similar. And they want to do that with their feet. Whoever said that they moved here from Kirkwood and they walked everywhere, that's what both boomers and millennials are looking for, walkable communities, communities that are connected. So how can we, in Pacific, capitalize on that? Also, entrepreneurs are looking for those same types of locations. They're looking for unique, they're looking for authentic. Entrepreneurs love to take on challenges, and they can figure those things out. We've made a shift in when we talk about business recruitment, that we're looking for business owners, more we're looking for entrepreneurs. Because many times we end up with hobby business owners within our communities who keep erratic hours and aren't serving the clientele or the customer base that's there. So entrepreneurs are those mindsets that figure those things out, and they go where the customers are. Also, Main Street helps communities succeed in the new economy. It's a different world out there. Retail is not what it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 6 months ago. Retail is evolving, and so we can't say we want it like it used to be, because that's not possible. The world has changed. So what has taken its place? And that's what we need to figure out, because downtowns are becoming, across the country, downtowns are becoming vital, energetic, energized places. That's where people are wanting to live. And so downtowns are on the rise. And so how do we capitalize on that and make that happen? So this is our organization, Missouri Main Street. We started in 2006, but we actually started before that in 1996. And we were actually a state agency at that time. We were part of the Department of Economic Development. And through their staff and budget, they could only work with 10 communities at that time. And for about 10 years, they only worked with 10 communities because of a capacity issue. But then in the early 2000s, Missouri Main Street, Humanities, and a couple other organizations were removed from the budget. And those 10 communities that were part of that program, plus about 2 or 3 other communities that wanted to be in that program, said, hey, we like this Main Street model. And so in 2006, they started a nonprofit to continue that effort in Missouri. So last year, we celebrated 10 years in Missouri as a non-for-profit, helping spread the word on the Main Street model and providing those tools and resources that our Missouri communities need. So, like I said earlier, today we service about 140 communities in various stages through our trainings and educations, through grant programs like this. So state legislators, we appreciate your help. We do still receive money through the Department of Economic Development, but it's only about 1/5 of our budget. The rest of it comes from our nonprofit side through partnerships, through putting on workshops and conferences, and also through other grants that we receive from the USDA and Missouri Arts Council and different associations. So that's how we're funded and how we operate. Our purpose is to ensure the long-term success of our downtowns in Missouri in creating, educating, training, and empowering a comprehensive, professional, volunteer-based downtown revitalization organization. Really, we provide tools and resources. That's our role. So So let's go down to Main Street. Let's talk more specifically about what Main Street is and what it does. So why Main Street? Donovan Ripkema, who said there is simply no more cost-effective economic development program of any type, on any scale, anywhere in the country than Main Street. He studies and puts the numbers behind what Main Street programs do. He talks about the return on investment. He studies the economics of historic preservation, and he travels all over the world, actually. And there is really no other organization with as much impact on downtown revitalization as Main Street. So here's some of the ground rules for Main Street revitalization. Main Street is historic preservation. It's also commercial development. It's also economic development. It's all inclusive. There are some times that we've had developers call us and say that they want to create a Main Street community from scratch. That's not who we are, and that's not what we do. We're all inclusive, not there for a particular developer or not there for a particular initiative. We're there as a community organization. And someone mentioned earlier, I think city council person, Main Street concepts do transfer across the community. And many of our higher functioning Main Street communities, we call them accredited communities because they're accredited by both National and Missouri Main Street. Many of those cities use the same Main Street principles throughout the whole community because they're so effective. Back to that comprehensive approach. Main Street also drives overall community development. School districts, major employers look at downtown as a recruitment tool for both talent and also for students. So Main Streets help in that community development aspect across the whole community. And I always say to communities, is your downtown a liability or an asset? Because you never know who's driving through your downtown that may be considering moving there to live, or maybe considering bringing a business or industry to your community. So a strong downtown is very important in those efforts. And Main Street, as I learned, is not a merchants association. It's way more than that. So it's a comprehensive approach. It's not just focused on one issue or initiative. Sometimes you hear particularly big cities say, you know what, if we had a zoo, we'd be perfect. We'd be a perfect city. Or if we had this development, we'd have it made. That's not how it works. You have to be comprehensive in your thought process in development and not just focusing on one issue or one initiative. And we hear that in downtowns too. You know, if we could get one anchor store, well, that one anchor store is not going to fix all your problems. So we've got to look at it from a little different perspective. Main Street, comprehensive approach. Also, local community-based organizations set the strategies. We're going to do some of that tonight with the brainstorming. It's not what I think is important to Pacific, it's what you think is important to Pacific. And so that's what we're going to tap into, and that's going to help set the agenda going forward. Also leveraging that local leadership. 90% of your downtown revitalization efforts are going to come from within the community. And that's both people, partnerships, and dollars. And so that's what we have to tap into. Also, it enhances the social, economic, cultural, and environmental sustainability of a community. And also, Main Street builds leaders within the community. Main Street approach, in many communities, someone volunteered for a Main Street organization to help maybe pour beer, ended up being on the board of directors at some point, and then ran for city council or ran for state office. So it's an organization that also helps build community leaders for the future. And so I love it when I have youngsters that come to these meetings because that is the future of your community. When we started in Excelsior Springs, one of our shop owners' son came in a car seat to our board meetings, and he's now 11 years old, 12 years old, and his Cub Scout troop helps with some of the cleanup projects downtown. And so I just see that continuing as we move through that process of him getting older. But that's how it happens. And this room is very diverse, both young and older here. So that's awesome. So why is downtown important? Downtown is a symbol of your community's economic health. I mentioned that earlier. An asset or a liability. And you've got to look at it from a visitor's perspective. Sometimes as residents, we have blinders on for those things that we don't want to pay attention to because they've been that way for so long. But we've got to look at it from a fresh perspective. Also, it's a partnership between the private sector and the public sector. That's what makes Main Street so important. Main Streets are typically 501c3 non-for-profit organizations there for the public good. But if they partner with the city, with the public side, there's a great relationship there because the city can do certain things that a nonprofit can't do, and a nonprofit can do certain things that a city can't do. So it's a great relationship of them working together. It's also a local quality of life issue. When I think of downtowns, usually my picture in my head is of their downtown. When I think of a community, like if I think of Sedalia, I think of their downtown. If I think of Clinton, I think of their downtown. And so it's that local quality of life thing. Community pride. Downtowns are the center, the heart of your community. Most of the time, events that take place within the community every year, parades, fireworks, rodeos, whatever, those things usually happen in our downtown districts. And then you have that history aspect, those buildings, that culture. Stephen was sharing, where this building came from and the history behind it. But in the same conversation, talking about a beautiful train depot that was torn down. You're never going to get that back. And so how do we preserve those things, even if they don't have a current use? We don't want to get rid of the fabric within our community. So why is downtown important? Downtown supports local independent businesses that in turn support local families, community projects, and keep those profits circulating in the community. Several of you mentioned your business owners downtown. How many times do you donate to local projects, local events that are taking place in your community? A lot, right? Don't you get asked all the time? Yep. But you do that because of that community pride. The Walmart, the Lowe's, the Home Depots, most of those dollars from those entities go off to a corporate office somewhere. Those local businesses, those small businesses that operate here in Pacific, those dollars are circulated more within the community. Do you guys consider yourself a tourist destination? Yeah, right? You have Six Flags next door, right? You have the Merrimack River. You have Route 66.
We're Train Town, USA.
You're a train town. Yes, you are a tourist destination. So how do we capitalize on that? Heritage tourists, which those folks that love history, spend 2.5 times more than the average visitor. They also visit twice as many places and they stay longer. You guys have a tourism tax. I assume that's a bed tax, right? So the longer they stay, the more that those dollars come into the community. So how do we tap into those folks? Do you guys know where that picture is up at the top?
Excelsior Springs.
Can you see the mouse ears on top of that sign? Marceline, Missouri. Boyhood home of Walt Disney. All right, downtowns are also where arts and culture thrive. Many communities have tapped into that eclectic arts and culture activity. I understand that there are plays that still take place up here, right? Performances? No?
During Heritage Days.
During Heritage Days, okay. This used to be an opera house. So there's an arts and cultural culture here in Pacific. But many communities tap into those things, either outdoor music events, festivals, and so usually those types of events take place in downtown districts. Downtown serve as a good incubator for new businesses, creating new jobs and investments. We talked about that whole entrepreneurial aspect. Entrepreneurs love eclectic historic buildings because they can have so much fun with designing their business to go on the inside of those. Downtown rehabilitation work stimulates the local economy. Materials and labor for new commercial construction often come from out of town. So when you renovate a historic building, usually you have to use local tradesmen. And Whereas when you're building new construction, sometimes those folks come from out of town. So historic renovations, those of you that are doing some rehabilitation projects are probably familiar with that. This is Excelsior Springs. It was an old hotel on the left, and it was converted into senior housing on the right. Downtown infrastructure is a major public investment that's already taken place. So unlike building a new subdivision or a new industrial park, you've got to bring all of those utilities and infrastructure to those locations, which can cost millions of dollars. You've already got that infrastructure downtown. So how do we do that? We do that through the Main Street 4-point approach. So when I mentioned about the National Trust studying downtowns and those 4 aspects, the physical side, the economic side, the social side, and the civic side, that is what developed the Main Street 4-point approach. So the physical side, of course, is the appearance while preserving the historic environment. The economic side, business retention, business recruitment, also strategic use of space. The civic side is bringing people together, building consensus, partnerships, and resources. And the social side, of course, is fostering that positive image, positive center of activity for your community. So we translate that into the 4 points, which are organization, design, economic vitality, and promotion. So organization develops partners and resources, design develops spaces and places, economic vitality develops entrepreneurs and businesses, and promotion develops customers. So you can see that that's a comprehensive approach covering all of the bases that deal with development within our community. So here's another way of looking at some of those activities, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but what I said earlier with partnerships with the organization side, the physical side, how downtown looks and feels, the economic side, business retention, business recruitment. Side note, we always do business retention before we do business recruitment. We need to focus on those businesses that are already here before we start bringing new ones in. And then the social side, that's the fun stuff, the events, the activities that are taking place. So here's some examples. So the organization, the civic side, it's communication. You've got to communicate with your partners within the community. So a lot of communities use newsletters, whether it's digital, although we have a lot of folks going back to printed newsletters because it's so easy to hit that delete button on your email and not read what you get. So a lot of folks are going back to that printed newsletter, keeping folks informed of what's happening within their community. Also, partnerships are explaining what the organization is and what they do. This is from Cape Girardeau, and so they're talking about volunteers and donating to the cause, but also what each of their committees is doing within the next year or what their accomplishments have been. But then also asking for that investment, that partnership. Do this with us as we work on promoting and revitalizing our downtown. And we don't call them members, we call them partners because it is a partnership. On the physical or the design side, physical improvements, both meaning buildings and public spaces. So providing some guidelines for talking about your building structure and what are acceptable or traditional ways that those buildings would look. So that can help those folks doing those revitalization efforts, give them some guidelines or some examples of what they could do with their building. Also, maybe taking it a step further, some of our communities actually have or contract with an architect to provide some renderings. I think I have some examples in just a second. Also, those public spaces, those parks. This is Excelsior Springs. We put in a pocket park in our downtown where a building unfortunately burned down and had to be removed, so we turned it into an event space. Also, street signs. Someone mentioned wayfinding signs, street signs. It's important to move people around the downtown so they can figure out where they're going. And streetscapes, landscaping. So I mentioned the architectural services. Sometimes property owners just don't know what to do with their buildings. And we were actually in Moberly 2 weeks ago with an architect working with their downtown Main Street program. So this is one of the buildings they wanted the designer to look at. It looks pretty awful, doesn't it? Got the boarded up windows on the top. Who wants to go in that shop? Doesn't look very inviting, does it? So by him doing some renderings, certainly changed the look of the building. Doesn't that look a little more inviting? Yeah. So sometimes property owners need some help with that. And so that could be a service that the Main Street program through the design initiative could help and assist with.
So what did you actually provide for that?
Moberly is part of a different grant that we offer. It's a STEP grant, so we've been working with them for the past year on building their capacity. And so part of that grant, we brought this architect to their community just to provide the inspiration to help the property owner in his decisions about what to do with the building. So I'm sorry that's hard to read. The economic side, or the economic vitality. So a big part of that is retail promotion, helping those existing businesses. Maybe that's through sidewalk sales or ladies' nights out or Small Business Saturday. I don't know if you guys follow Small Business Saturday very much every year. You guys know about Black Friday, Small Business Saturday. Black Friday sales have been going down. Small Business Saturday sales have been going up, which is awesome. So that's showing you that trend. People want to shop small. Also helping property owners. This is a sign that I saw in Detroit when we went to the national conference there. If you can't read it, it says free coffee with the purchase of the Wurlitzer building. So helping those property owners with their the sales of buildings. Maybe that's through offering or putting together some incentive or pulling together the incentives that are already available within your community to help those property owners with their selling their buildings. Incentives, I mentioned, some Main Street communities offer facade improvement grants. We did that in Excelsior Springs. We would give a grant out to help business owners with their sign, up to $500 as a matching grant, or up to $1,000 for a facade improvement. And while that didn't seem like much money, a little bit of a carrot can certainly help some folks move off the mark. In a 3-year period of time, we awarded about $6,000. That resulted in over $40,000 worth of improvements being done to our buildings. And we kind of had a hit list of buildings that we needed to target, and so we were able to help those property owners provide a little incentive to get them to move off their mark, and they did. Also, cities could do tax abatement programs. So the city may already have some programs. It's a Chapter 353 tax abatement, which can be a good opportunity for property owners. There's also some state programs too. So the last is the social or the promotional side. So a lot of that has to do with events. And usually music type events are very popular. This is in Cape Girardeau, I believe. They do an outside music festival once a month. This is popular right now, farm-to-table dinners out in the middle of the street. Very visual, lots of fun. We had 3 Main Street communities do them last year, and we have about 10 talking about doing them this year. So actually at our state conference in July, we're going to have a session on farm-to-table dinners. And you know, when I mentioned that I look at downtowns as the living room for our communities, I'm from the Kansas City area, and when we won the World Series a couple years ago, downtown became the living room for the entire community. And that happens in a lot of communities for those types of celebrations. This is downtown Sedalia. They do this at Thanksgiving with their lighting ceremony. And then just events that bring folks around from business to business, where they maybe have a punch card, or I think this is a wine walk that takes place in Liberty. I think it's called Wine About Winter, something like that. They do it in January or February. So there's a card, you get a punch that can go to every business, and every business is serving wine and some food. So it's just a great way to get people in the doors of those existing businesses that are currently in your community. Ladies' nights are very popular. Ladies' nights out. Shop small. So Main Street has 8 guiding principles. I'm going to go through these pretty quick because we've talked about a lot of this already. Comprehensive, again, no single focus. Long-term success. It takes a while for these things to happen, which is that incremental part. It happens in steps. You know, I told you we started our program in 2006 in Excelsior Springs, and I remember going to some Main Street meetings and hearing these other Main Street programs have $1 million projects in their downtown. So there's a $1 million revitalization project or something going on in their downtown. And we were excited to have a $10,000 project, you know. We thought that was just cool. But it comes in steps. So 3 years into our Main Street program, we had about $60,000 worth of development take place in our downtown. We had a housing development come in right next, parallel to our Main Street downtown. We didn't have a Main Street, we had Broadway. And then we also, the Elms Hotel went through a $20 million renovation. So it was awesome, but it takes all those little steps to make those big things happen. And both of those developers said Main Street was not the reason they did the project, but it was a reason for them to look at the community and say there is an effort to revitalize this downtown. They've had some successes, so we want to be part of that. So both of those developers noted that. Self-help, I mentioned that earlier. 90% of your resources are going to come from within your community. Partnerships, both public and private. Who do you think should be involved in a Main Street program?
Everyone.
Who said that? Everyone. Perfect. Usually I get property owners, business owners, residents, and by the time we get listing everybody, it's everyone. But it should be. Financial institutions, utilities, property owners, business owners, city, county, all those folks should be partners within, because they're all going to benefit from a strong downtown. And each sector has a role to play. Build on existing assets. Actually, one of the next trainings that I do here in the community in a couple months is going to be some asset mapping. Because you have to start with where you're at. What assets do you currently have? And you have quite a few assets. And you have a couple assets that are being developed. This river trail. It's going to be awesome for your community. So that's what we're going to do on one of the next ones, is look at all the things that are currently here. And it usually surprises communities when we put that list together, because they forget about some of those assets that are in the town. Quality. Everything we do, we want it to be quality. Because it's the best thing to do. You want to have quality work, quality projects, quality events, but because everybody's watching you. Everybody's watching what you're doing as a Main Street program. And so we want to prove it to them. We live in Missouri, so let's show them. Change. This is a hard one, because we all have memories of what downtown was. And I hate to tell you, it's not going to be the same. But it's going to be different. And that can be good. It's very unlikely that department stores are going to come back to downtowns like they used to be. But retail is thriving in downtowns. And so we have to tap in and find out what that is. And there's a term for it. It's called micro retail. It's very specialized retail. And I'll tell a quick story. In Excelsior Springs, we had a popcorn store that wanted to open up a shop. And I'm sitting at a chamber lunch as the executive director for the Main Street program. And someone sits down across from me and says, "So I hear you have this popcorn store downtown. It's never going to make it. You can't make it with one product." And I kind of smiled and said, "Yeah, you should wait and see." Because as the Main Street program, we worked with that popcorn shop. We knew that they knew their market. They used to travel around to festivals. We knew their product. They knew the popcorn business. They are still around 6 years later and very popular within the community. So those are the types of things. That's new retail, okay? So that's what we have to tap into and figure out. And a popcorn store may not work in every community, but maybe it's a wine shop. Actually, I understood there's a community that has a shop that just focuses on wine accessories. So, you know, it just depends what happens in your community and what the needs and wants are. But that's what will help you figure out. Implementation oriented. To me, this is the secret weapon of Main Street. We are action oriented. And I'm going to dog on cities for just a minute because all of them do it. They come up with these beautiful master plans. They spend thousands of dollars to have consultants come in and develop these master plans. And they get these beautiful documents, and usually it's in a binder, and they put this binder up on a shelf. and they never open it again. I'm sure your community's not like that. But they get dusty. They forget about the implementation side of things. That's where Main Street is different. Main Street is implementation-oriented, action-oriented. And so that's going to be part of the training that we bring here to the community. And I just talked about all that stuff. So there's stages of Main Street programs. You guys are in the Catalyst stage, which is growing as a Main Street program. Your volunteers are on board. They believe in your vision. They believe that they want a downtown that's vital. Often there's pioneers, which in this case is your Pacific Partnership as a pioneer. And you've got some entrepreneurs. I mean, we heard from some in the room that are revitalizing buildings and opening businesses. So your growth phase is going to come in a couple years. You have to crawl before you can walk. And so I don't think any of our Main Street organizations get beyond the growth stage, because the next stage is the maintenance phase. And you guys are very familiar with your neighbor, Washington, Missouri. They've been doing Main Street for over 25 years. And they joke that they're a 25-year overnight success because it takes a while. And their list of to-dos and goals and priorities is just as long today as it was 15 years ago. So I don't think we ever leave the growth phase. I hope we never leave the growth phase. So we kind of talked about this earlier. Who should be engaged? Those folks, which is basically everyone. I didn't mention earlier preservationists, so those folks should be involved because they all would receive a benefit from a strong downtown. So just to show you a little bit of the impact of Main Street in Missouri, and this is about off and on, because programs can wax and wane. This is about 20 communities reporting over the past 10 years. So $683 million in private investment. $683 million in private investment to $140 million in public investment. So you can see that the private side is, of course, way out investing the public side. And that would be expected. 526 net new businesses. So that's taking the businesses that are closing, the businesses that are opening. More businesses are opening than closing. Even in 2006, 2007, 2008, during the recession, our Main Street communities were adding more jobs than they were losing, which was not the national trend. 2,936 net new jobs. Again, taking out the lost jobs, adding in the new ones. 285,000 volunteer hours. And the reason we count or ask our Main Street communities to calculate volunteer hours is because that shows that it is a community-based organization. And there's a dollar amount that the IRS puts to volunteer hours. And currently in Missouri, that's $21.31. So that represents an investment in our Missouri Main Street communities of $6 million. So that's pretty impressive. So this is kind of how a Main Street program operates. It's volunteer-driven leadership structure. So you have a board of directors. You can have a program director. It's not a requirement to be a Main Street program. It would be a requirement if you wanted to be an accredited Main Street program, though. But it's not a requirement. We have many Main Street programs that do not have a program director, a paid executive director. A lot of our communities organize under the 4 points as a committee structure. That's not necessary, just as long as you're practicing the 4 points. You're usually led by that board of directors representing the community, supporting the committees organized around the 4-point approach, and managed by a professional staff person, like I said, but not a requirement. So, as an organization, as you're looking to bring in volunteers, bring in leadership within the organization, these are some of the folks that you might look for that would bring the talents needed for those 4 points. So organization, maybe somebody with public relations or communication skills, organizational skills, fundraising, definitely, volunteer management, design, those folks that are preservation-minded. Do you have a preservation commission here? No? Okay. Historical society? Okay. So that might be good folks to get involved in the design side. Planning, design, construction folks, those people with attention to detail. You could also throw in gardeners or landscapers within that point. Promotion, people who love to organize events. should be involved in that effort. Marketing, image building, advertising, graphic design. Economic vitality, of course, those folks involved in economic development or strategic planning. So, to be successful, you need to have a vision of what your downtown would look like. And that's something that we're going to work with the partnership on, is refining that vision and mission to make sure that it reflects the current climate within the community. So you have to be focused on a vision, and we're going to help define some of that tonight through the brainstorming part. Driven by a mission, what do we need to accomplish? And then directed by those action plans, that implementation side of things, of course, and a budget. And then we also need to measure those results. So I'm going to skip through this because I basically explained all of it. A goal without a plan is just a wish. So we have to write these things down and go through that planning process. Measuring results can be in many different ways, but we do need to measure or set some points so that we can measure going forward. And those can be vacancy rates. You know, I mentioned Excelsior Springs, where our vacancy rate has changed. That was a measurement for us. Sales tax downtown was a measurement for us. Volunteer hours is a measurement. So those are things that you can use. Working with the city business permits within your downtown district. So you can track that from year to year if you have that business permit process. But you can also measure attendance at events because that can be turned into, the Division of Tourism has some formulas that people coming to your town for an event, a day-long event, spend X dollars within your community, so you can turn that into the economic impact. So all those things are good to measure, so you can see if you're headed in the right direction. If we're not measuring things, we don't know where we're headed. We could be going backwards. So measurement is important. So I've given you a lot of information in an hour about Main Street, and there's a lot of information that I haven't talked about with Main Street. When we do our state conference and we do the national conference, there is a 3-hour session on each of the 4 points. So I've just given you the tip of the iceberg. So here's additional resources if you want to go look up more information on Main Street. Our website is momainstreet.org. And because the Pacific Partnership is a member of our organization through the affiliate grant program, you can request a login and have access to our resource library. So you just click on member login, fill out your information, we approve you, you have access to that. So momainstreet.org, okay? There's also the National Main Street site, which is just mainstreet.org, and they have a lot of information on their website also. We also do trainings and conferences. There's a quarterly workshop in Jackson on March the 24th, so next week, next Friday, actually talking about the refresh that National Main Street did. And then we have a state conference in July. We're doing a little different state conference this year because we are hosting here in Missouri the National Main Street Conference in 2018. It's going to be in Kansas City. So you guys are going to have a great opportunity to attend a National Main Street Conference here in Missouri and hear from speakers from all over the country. And that's going to be the end of March of 2018. So because of that, we're paring back our state conference from a 3-day conference to a day and a half. And we're doing it in Columbia, and it's called Show Me the Money, because we're inviting all of the state agencies to come and talk about the different programs and initiatives they have that a Main Street program can tap into. So we'll have the Missouri Arts Council there, we'll have the Department of Economic Development there, we'll have the Humanities, USDA, we'll have all those different entities there talking about programs and dollars that you can tap into as a Main Street program and as a community. So that'll be the last week in July. So, now we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you on what's important to you about your downtown, about your community. So, what we're going to do is we're going to divide into 4 groups. And we're going to go to different corners of the room, and there's a leader for each of the groups. And we're just going to brainstorm. And I've given the leaders of those groups some information to help in that process. And I need 2 people to guard the door. Nobody can leave. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. So I need my leaders to come up here to the front, please.
there anything with Main Street that'll help the retail businesses compete against Amazon and the internet?
That's a good question about retail businesses. You know,
Because, I mean, if you watch the news, the Gordons, the Gander Mountains, the Bass Pros, they're all going under because of the internet sales that are being done. Is there anything that's gonna help get the downtown that you guys have for advice?
in a quick answer, so we can get to the brainstorming, it really comes down to customer service and providing those things, those intangible things that Amazon can't provide. And it's that niche market. It's creating those events within your community that bring people to your downtown. So Main Street's role is to bring people to the district. Your role is to get them in your door. Okay? So I've got my 4 folks up here. We've got Maria, organization.